Hello, it's Sunday, 20th of June 2021. We're fast approaching the longest day, midsummer, the day when the day starts to become shorter instead of longer. But I don't think we're quite there yet. I think still the sun is setting very late and coming up very early. I no longer feel like a vampire. And we're still in the middle of the COVID experience. We will always have COVID in our lives from now on, whether we like it or not. We won't be able to snap back to the pre-COVID years like nothing ever happened and just pick up and carry on as if what happened was just a mild pause, like somebody pressed pause on the VHS of our lives. That's not how it's going to be. There's going to be pre-COVID, during COVID, and after COVID. And whatever happens after this is going to be after COVID. But it's not going to be over. It's not going to finish. It's just going to move into a new phase of whatever it is. Now, today I'm going to be talking about, on the 110th installment of Mark Talks About His Records, I'm going to be talking about a record by a band I absolutely love. One which a band which not enough people like, I think. A band that could and would and in another world perhaps should be much, much bigger. The Wedding Present. And I'm going to be talking about their debut album, George Best, which in my mind is actually the second Wedding Present album, because the first album that they recorded, Tommy, was a compilation album of singles that happened to be released afterwards. I think the band could have made an album before George Best, and that album could have been Tommy, but they chose to release singles instead. And it was 2.5 years after the band formed before they released George Best, and they released, I think, 3 or 4 singles, which came out on the Tommy album, which I mentioned in a previous episode. And George Best is to me the band's second album, and even though Tommy was released afterwards, Tommy consists entirely of songs that were recorded before George Best. When I file the albums together, I put Tommy first as the first record, and that's why when I've been talking through the Wedding Present albums, Tommy has been the first one. So what I'm going to talk about with George Best is the album, the singles, the lineup, and pretty much anything else that I can think of whilst I'm going ahead and doing it. Now, I have been asked to talk about George Best himself as a sports baller, and as I previously mentioned, I'm not a huge fan of sport ball, and it seems to have monopolised British television recently. We are in the midst of the Euro 2020s, although obviously it's the Euro 21s by the time we actually get here. George Best, I think, was chosen to be on the cover of the record and the title of the record because I think that there's some aspirations or some ideas around masculinity and manliness that come with the concept of George Best. So if you look at the cover of the CD here, I mean, with all of the nicest respect, the song titles that are on here, the cover imagery that we've got on here, you can see why Smiths fans really were quite fans of the Wedding Present. They're bands from similar parts of the world. They have a similar sonic and vocal range, perhaps not quite so wide in the case of David Gedge, and they mine a similar furrow in terms of writing guitar-based songs about love and loss and all the things that go with that. So if you look at this could look like it could have been, if you just replace the words The Wedding Present and put the words The Smiths on there, it could be a Smiths album cover, really. And that's not a criticism in any way. There was the cliche that The Wedding Present and James were Smiths fans' second favourite band. And certainly the shadow of the Smiths, I think, hung over The Wedding Present for a little period of time, although obviously the two have gone very, very different paths over the years. And some of the song titles that we've got on here, song titles like What Did Your Last Servant Die Of? You Can't Moan, Can You? Why are you being so reasonable now? If those don't sound like Smiths B-side titles, I don't know what does. Fantastic song titles. Sometimes it feels like the Wedding Present wrote the song title first and then decided to write the song after it, but I think actually that the band actually took perhaps a slightly different approach when it came to writing songs. They just wrote the song first and then they thought about what might be an appropriate title afterwards. It was a pretty interesting kind of place to be, actually. So George Best is the band's debut album, although it's the second album that they recorded. It was released before Tommy, and I think, as I've mentioned before, the title of the album was clearly designed to kind of look at the aspects of masculinity that come with the name George Best. Now, George Best, in case you don't know, was a very popular, very good footballer in the 60s and 70s and probably a bit of the 80s as well. He was also an alcoholic, womanizer, a very popular man. And so really kind of shattered the idea of what a footballer would be. So if in the 70s and 60s, for example, if you thought about a footballer, you thought about a boring, bland career bloke who probably earned the same as your dad, lived in a 2-up, 2-down, and, you know, married the girl next door and did that forever. Whereas with George Best, as a footballer, he was regarded, I think, as a very, very different person, and had a very different approach to pretty much everything. So he was generally regarded by many people as one of the best footballers of all time. There's that cliche that he's lying on the bed in his hotel room, and he's got, you know, one of the Miss Worlds, Miss Canada or Miss wherever, in the bed with him, and he's got his winnings from a casino or a football game, and the hotel waiter comes in and goes, "George, where did it all go wrong?" And what a wonderful phrase that was. It opens a whole universe of possibility around the concept around what masculinity was. The other thing also is, you know, George, as you can see on the front of this, he had long hair, he had a beard, he would play football without his shirt tucked in. He smashed the mould in terms of what it was acceptable to be in terms of regard of a masculine construct. And yes, he was an ODB, and he put it about a bit and had a few, you know, affairs and dalliances and other things, which obviously when you look at the lyric matter for the George Best album, you could kind of think it's drawing a comparison, isn't it? Because all of the songs on George Best are songs around relationships, either your own relationship, somebody else's relationship, and no relationship you've ever heard on the bus. And they're not, and the cliche being is that all art is autobiography, but it never tells you whose autobiography it is. And sometimes it's the autobiography of people that aren't the writer. So, and George was also an alcoholic, and I lived in Surbiton for a couple of years between 2003 and 2005, and I would frequently see him in the window of the Victoria pub, and the one that was next to the railway as well, kind of sat there staring out at the world with a pint right next to him. And to see the huge gap between who he once was and who he now was, you know, to say it was sobering is the wrong use of the word, but it's very interesting to see that, you know, every action has a consequence. And when you're a recovering alcoholic, it's very difficult, actually, especially if, you know, everyone drives or everyone kind of pours their attention and their knowledge of you towards being, you know, somebody who drinks and sleeps with women or whatever it was that George Best did. And then you go, well, actually, you can't even have one drink because that is, you know, the beginning of the end. George had a liver transplant as well. And so to see him there, I was just kind of thinking, God, it must be really tough, actually, having to live like that. Not necessarily the direction I thought we were going to go in when I started talking about the album. Instead, I'm going to talk about the wedding present album, George Best, as opposed to the footballer, George Best. Now, I should also point out, I've done a little bit of research before I did this. I have read this book here, David Gedge, the band's principal songwriter and song member all the way through, looking very serious there in a book called Sleeve Notes. There is a website called Gedge Songs, and also there's a site called Something and Nothing. Something and Nothing lends itself also to part of the title of this absolutely essential documentary, if you can find it, Something Left Behind, a music documentary about the George Best album and period of the band. It's a fascinating insight into what life was like, and I have to remember the area that the band came up from was Leeds in 1987. You know, it was a city which had birthed the Sisters of Mercy, the Mission, the Wedding Present themselves, the Chameleons had a strong connection to there. Those type of things. You know, it's very much a product of a humdrum town that will drag you down, really. And sometimes when you're living in an environment like that, bearing in mind that in the 80s at least, and I remember the 80s, it was tough financially. So there wasn't much joy to be found out there. And the joy that you found was normally through sex, drink, and rock and roll. All of which, of course, are encapsulated inside George Best. So, starting off the George Best story, although it's taken me 10 minutes to get there, was the single My Favourite Dress. Here's the 7-inch of My Favourite Dress, which appeared in a different form on Tommy. So My Favourite Dress was re-recorded for George Best here, and it was given a different ending on the George Best album. But the single of My Favourite Dress, it was the first song that the band recorded and released that later appeared on George Best, and this was on the band's Reception Records label. The second single, or more correctly, the first single that doesn't appear on Tommy, the first single which actually comes from the album is Anyone Can Make a Mistake, and there's a 3-track 12-inch and there's a 7-inch. It's backed with All About Eve, by the way, not the song that gave the band its name. So My Favourite Dress had a 12-inch release, by the way, backed with... Oh, no, this is Anyone Can Make a Mistake. Sorry, taxi for me. So Anyone Can Make a Mistake is on the album. It's the first single from the album. It's not necessarily the most obvious single from the album. The most obvious single from the album is My Favourite Dress, by the way, which obviously was on Tommy. Anyone Can Make a Mistake came as a 12-inch backed with All About Eve and Getting Nowhere Fast. And I think Getting Nowhere Fast, I think that's a cover version. And there was also a number of Peel sessions. And as I said before, the band didn't really do demos at the time. They did Peel sessions and evening sessions where they played previously unreleased songs. So they were able to record the songs, get paid for it as opposed to paying for it. And also, they were playing the songs live anyway. So this is the evening session from 1986. Let me just quickly check. 1986. And yes, and this has Everyone Thinks He Looks Daft, which is the opening song on George Best, on My Favourite Dress, Shatner, and a cover of Gang of Fours. I found that essence rare. And then, of course, George Best was released as an album. Now, George Best, this is an original vinyl copy. It doesn't have the original outer sleeve. As I've mentioned before, I would buy records on the basis of how much they cost, not whether they had sleeves or not, because I didn't listen to the sleeves. So my copy of George Best has always ever only had the inner sleeve on there. And there's a not quite androgynous picture of George Best, but a picture of a man that perhaps you wouldn't necessarily expect to be the premier footballer of the age. So that's an original vinyl version on Reception Records, recorded in summer 1987. At some point, relatively recently, I actually decided it was time to bite the bullet and buy a proper new version of George Best. I figure if I bought a new version, it had only been 30 years since I last bought it. So that's a pretty good lifespan, a pretty good investment for what was, I think, £2, the original LP. And here's the original album, or more correctly, this is the Play It Again Sam Records 2019 green vinyl version of the record. At least I think it's green vinyl. Let's quickly check. Yes, everything comes on green vinyl these days, or it comes on coloured vinyl. If you don't have enough records, coloured vinyl is God's way of telling you that you need to buy more records. This is the green vinyl version of it, and what you'll see here is actually the Reception Records logo is replaced with a text that says The Wedding Present. This is on Play It Again Sam Records, and if I can quickly check, My Favourite Dress ends side 1 and Shatner opens side 2. So George Best is not the best wedding present album, and I'll be really blunt about that. It isn't for two reasons. One, I think the songwriting, David and the band were still learning how to write songs, and that is in no way a criticism, by the way. Every band's first few songs, there's going to be some stinkers in there. The Wedding Present decided not to release their stinkers. But what they did do is that when you're operating on a small budget, when you're operating in small rooms, rehearsal rooms, and the songs only exist when you play them, much like Joy Division, you tend to play songs that are faster and louder so you can hear yourself over the shit metal band called Big Dog's Cock that's playing next door. And no doubt, in 1987, trying and failing to do a cover version of Def Leppard's Rock of Ages, Gleben, Globen, 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 or however it goes. So all the songs on here are fast, they're loud, very strummy. Now the recording of George Best, you might think it sounds cheap. Well, it doesn't actually. The band spent a lot of money on the recording of it, but the drums on this album, somewhat bizarrely, the drums on George Best are electronic drums. And so, for example, the analog drums, the bloke whacking bits of skin is not on here. They programmed drum sounds into an electronic drum kit, and the band's drummer played into an electronic kit, and then they recorded the output from that. So it's all electronic drums on this. There's no analog drums on here at all, even though they're actually played by a human, Sean Sharman there. And the drums on it don't sound exactly like what they are, which is that it sounds like a late 80s drum machine that's been programmed and played by a human being, because it certainly would have been quicker to play the drum patterns than it would have been to tap it into a drum machine on this album. The acoustic guitars, very jingly jangly. The lead guitars and electric guitars, very and obviously the rest of it was very good. And I've seen the band play George Best live several times, although obviously the original lineup of the band hasn't reformed. I saw what is now known as probably one of their worst ever shows at the Tunbridge Wells Forum in 2013. I think Jeffrey Maddock and Jennifer Schwartz were in the band. It was their first show. They hadn't rehearsed a huge amount. They played George Best in full, and I must admit it's one of the very, very few gigs I've left before the end. I looked at my watch and I thought, well, if I go now, I can get the earlier train. I can be home half an hour sooner. And they were just about to play, the last songs on side 2, and the lineup just wasn't happening at all. Even David Gedge kind of recognised that when they played a warm-up show in 2014 before some festivals, and if you went to the 2013 show, you got a reduced price ticket, which is not really how the Wedding Present operate. They run a very tight ship financially. So I left the Tunbridge Wells Forum show in 2013 because it just wasn't very good at all. And it hurts me to say that when a band that I love play a bad show, but you have to be honest and say that is what it is. So George Best is a really great album. It's a series of little snapshots into the lives of people in their 20s in Leeds. Probably inspired quite a lot by the end of David's first major relationship, which, by the way, is detailed in graphic novel form in this series here, The Origins and Tales from the Wedding Present. These are a series of really quite funny, non-sequential, by the way, black and white, 40 or so page graphic novels that detail moments and slices from the band's life, the official biography of David Gedge. If you can, issue 0, which is called The Origins of the Wedding Present, is devoted exclusively to the band's early years, whereas, for example, number 1, there's a nice jig on Raise the Lost Ark. God knows what that is. That's probably The Thing. They're all replete with lots of pop culture references and funny and interesting moments about the life and times of being a relatively busy, struggling indie band between 1985 and 2021. I do recommend picking these up. If you're a fan of The Wedding Present, they're only £3 each. You can get most of them from the band shop, and you'd love to help out a band, wouldn't you, by buying their merch? As I've always said, buy a band's merch, buy its records, t-shirts, buy its stuff, and keep the band going. Spotify royalties ain't worth squat. I think it's less than 1,000. I say, what is it? Something like 97% of people that have got Spotify music on Spotify get less than £1,000 a year from Spotify. It's awful. Now, there's also, by the way, a book about the life and times of the Wedding Present called Thank You, Very Glad. This is a discard from Birmingham Libraries. You will think that Birmingham Libraries will have sponsored all of these. They don't. But this is one of those standard books which publishers put out quite quickly, and don't necessarily have a huge amount of a relationship to reality. Thank you, very glad. Read it, forgotten all of it, don't play at the slightest bit of attention. Widely regarded by the band as being having an interestingly detached relationship to the reality of the situation on occasions. It's probably my polite way of describing it. So George Best is a very good album. It's an album that's best experienced live as opposed to unrecorded form. The recorded version of it from 1987 is exactly what it is. It's the sound of a band's first album. They're learning how to write songs. They're learning how to make songs. They're learning how to record. And it's a debut album of no small promise. It's got some fantastic songs on it, by the way. It's got Everyone Thinks That He Looks Daft, which is one of the most wonderfully bitchy songs about your ex's new boyfriend I've ever heard about. Because, for example, the chorus line on it says, "Don't give me that because you were seen. Everybody thinks he looks daft, but at least you can have your dream." And you know, guess who I saw by your old house just the other day? That kid we used to think mad, but now he looks okay. It's basically just being bitchy about going, that boy that you're seeing, he looks a bit daft, doesn't he? There's also, what did your last servant die of? That's a phrase that was very common amongst parents in the 80s, especially when kids weren't doing things. I did used to say to my mum that my last servant died of back chat because I thought I was being funny and witty. Not strictly true. There's also Don't Be So Hard, A Million Miles. And A Million Miles was mooted to be a single at one point. There's a promotional 7-inch of it. One of the few wedding present records I haven't got because I think they're only 200. And it's difficult to get. And it's difficult to afford. I think the cheapest I've seen it is about £50. And A Million Miles has this wonderful line around, "I must have walked past this doorway 30 times just trying to catch your eye." Now, in the Tales of the Wedding Present graphic novel, it's implied that David liked the look of somebody on tour and emptied the band's van many times more than he needed to in order to see if he might be able to have a conversation with her. As I understand it, according to the graphic novel, which of course must be true, didn't really happen, but there you are. There's also All of This and More, My Favourite Dress, Shatner, which is very fast, by the way, Something and Nothing, It's What You Want That Matters, which appeared in another title, What Becomes of the Broken Hearted, on Tommy, Give My Love to Kevin, Anyone Can Make a Mistake, and You Can't Moan, Can You? Now, when the Wedding Present sequence albums, David spent a lot of time working on the sequencing, and he doesn't put the traditional song that you would expect to be the end of the album at the end of the album. It normally comes a couple of songs before the end of the album. Sorry, not enough caffeine today. So it kind of feels like, actually, that the album's ended and then the last couple of songs are maybe even an encore. So kind of like almost getting a mini gig, actually. But it's a good trick. It's one that he thinks about long and hard. And here's the 1997 cherry red, cooking vinyl 23 track version of the CD. Because I had the vinyl, there was no point in buying another version of it. And also here's the 1988 release of the Wedding Presents Peel Sessions. Now they also, around about this time, did a lot of radio sessions, which I will pick up shortly, and have got lots and lots of releases. So the radio sessions, by the way, there was an evening sessions disc that was released in 1994, 1996. Yeah, 1997 by Strange Fruit, as a contractual obligation to fulfil the band's contract that they had signed with Cooking Vinyl after they had split. So Evening Sessions 1986, 1994 contains the evening session which I showed you on here, by the way. So if you have this, you don't need one of the sessions on that, and vice versa. So that was released in 1997. In 1993, there was the John Peel Sessions album was released, because the band didn't release an album in 1993, which this contains Give My Love to Kevin, Getting Nowhere Fast, A Million Miles, and Something and Nothing. Sorry, I wasn't expecting to feel like that. I was expecting to feel a little bit more awake. So the John Peel Sessions album, 1987 to 1990, also has some John Peel sessions on it. There's also, as mentioned before, and I will mention again, the Wedding Presents 6 CD Peel Sessions box set. And the first disc of this that runs all the way up to Session 4, 26th of October 1987, effectively are all the radio sessions which went with and were associated with Tommy and George Best. And most of those radio sessions, or at least some of them, are on the 3 CD and DVD version of George Best that was released in 2014. But I'll come to that in a moment. Of course, if you are the wedding present, what is the most sensible thing for you to do the week that your debut album is released and you have got a Peel session? Well, the natural answer is, of course, to get in a couple of extra members, turn your singer into a rhythm guitarist, and release nothing but high-speed, frantic cover versions of Ukrainian folk rock songs, which is exactly what they did, which is also my least favourite wedding present album. So on here, this session 4 on the 26th of October 1987 and session 5 on the 15th of March 1988 contains a number, about 10 Ukrainian folk rock tracks. I do not like them. I have not listened to them. I bought the Ukrainian Sessions album when it came out, and I listened to it, and I was like, what the hell's this? And to be honest, I tried to listen to it again. I'm just like, I know it's the wedding present. I know it's almost the wedding present trying a different style of music and playing songs that, and you can hear when you listen to some of those songs, you can hear parts of the wedding present's DNA, the fast, high speed approach that they took, the frantic race to the end of the song, the big kind of like acoustic rhythm guitar parts. But I was like, this isn't very good. I don't like it. And if you were a fan of the band and you didn't like that, what you had to stick with was the mail order tapes. So if you were kind of sat there going, God, I really wish they'd do some new stuff. Well, the band did start releasing a series of mail order cassette live tapes, which you could buy directly from them. And also they had a couple of singles. So the first one of those singles that came out after the album is this one here. Nobody's Twisting Your Arm. Now this is the original 7-inch that I bought from Hob Days Records in Birmingham in England in 1988. By the way, it's knackered. I'm surprised. I played the B-side. I'm Not Always So Stupid, and I'm surprised it didn't jump all over the place. Nobody's Twisting Your Arm was not on the album. George Best. It's keeping in tradition with a lot of indie bands. Singles weren't always on the albums, and often they were definitely not on the albums. So Nobody's Twisting Your Arm is a pretty good A-side. The B-side is I Am Not Always So Stupid. That is one of the best songs I have ever heard. I'm Not Always So Stupid. I love that song so much. It's unfeasible and possibly illegal in 48 states. It's got no chorus. It's a frantic breakneck race that starts off with a frantically strummed rhythm guitar part and just keeps going. And the lyrics are very, very clear, and it's always like, every time the doorbell rings, I think it's you. Every letter the postman brings, I think it's you. You've changed your number and my phone book is such a mess, but I can't bear to rob your name out yet. It's an incredible song. If I was doing a cover versions album, I'm Not Always So Stupid would be one of the wedding present songs that I would put on it. It's a B-side, just a B-side, but it's one of the best B-sides I've ever heard. And I listened to it and I'm like, if that's the B-sides the bands are doing, you can get best. The A-sides are going to have to be amazing. That theory didn't strictly hold true. I'm Not Always So Stupid is still in my top 10 wedding present songs of all time. But if that song's a B-side, my God, what a band they're going to be. I'm Not Always So Stupid also came out on your 12-inch single, which also had Nothing Comes Easy and Don't Laugh on, ending with I'm Not Always So Stupid on there as a 12-inch. And there was another single which came out the wonderfully titled "Why Are You Being So Reasonable Now?" Now, this one is a promotional copy because it has a sticker from 10 Times Better on it. But also, actually, if you look very, very carefully on the back, you can see that there's a disc number that's etched in chalk on there. I bought this from Beano's Records. Although it says 23/07/2007, that Beano's in Croydon closed down around about late 2008, and I went there when it was closing down and everything was reduced, and I bought a lot of stuff, including this CD single. So Why Are You Being So Reasonable Now came in a number of formats. Actually, the band for the first time went beyond your standard 7-inch, 12-inch CDs. So the CD single had 5 tracks on it. It had Why Are You Being So Reasonable Now, Not From Where I'm Standing, Give My Love to Kevin, which is came in an acoustic portion, a track called Getting Better, and Pourquoi to Why Are You Being So Reasonable Now in French. And what that meant was that there was a French vocal. It's not going to be the last time that the Wedding Present sings songs in other languages. And so Why Are You Being So Reasonable Now? Here's a 7-inch here, is backed with Not From Where I'm Standing. And there was a second 7-inch, which is officially, I think, released in France, but also this is I don't even know where this version came from. This is the French language version of Why Are You Being So Reasonable Now, sung in French on the A side, backed with Give My Love to Kevin, the acoustic version. So there's a different B side on here than there is on the standard 7-inch, because the standard 7-inch is Not From Where I'm Standing. And Not From Where I'm Standing, by the way, takes its name from a line in 2 James Bond films, Thunderball and Man with the Golden Gun, which Man with the Golden Gun is the one I remember more, when the lady has her what is that, belly button jewellery stolen, and she goes, "Oh, I've lost my charm," and Roger Moore says, "Not from where I'm standing." Now, interestingly, it's the first time that the Wedding Present mentioned James Bond, and that became a common running theme throughout a lot of the work that David Gedge was going to do over the next 30 years. Of course, starting with Not From Where I'm Standing and ending with the charity album Not From Where I'm Standing, which was released last year. Now, there's a 12-inch, by the way, Why Are You Being So Reasonable Now, which doesn't have the French language version of Why Are You Being So Reasonable Now on it. Now, I did mention the band started selling live tapes by mail order. I don't have those tapes because they cost £5 each, and I was fairly pushed in terms of money at the time. Instead, in 2007, the band started releasing the live tapes as double CDs. They had a very interesting deal with their record label, which is that anything that the record label chose not to release, the band were allowed to release without violating their contract. So, for example, single like Sucker, for example, the record label didn't want to release it, so they released it and sold it on tour themselves. Now, the live tapes were something a little bit different. This is Live 1987, which features 2 shows, live tapes number 1 and number 2. Live tape number 1 is Leicester Polytechnic on the 5th of May 1987. That's where I went to university. Live tape number 2 is the Munchin, Alabama Hall on the 22nd of November 1987. And on the 3 CD and DVD edition of George Best, released in 2014, the live tape was actually Rotterdam 1988, which was released on here, Live 1988, which features Rotterdam and the Valencia Arena. It was released in 2010, and I think at this point the band's lineup had changed. So Simon Smith had joined the group on drums, and Sean Charman had left. So that happened late 1987, early 1988. And as I've mentioned before, if you're in the Wedding Present, what are you going to do when your album comes out? You're going to do a peel session of Ukrainian folk rock. The band then decided to release, before they looked at any other options, they decided to go and release the Ukrainian Peel Sessions album, which was available as a 10-inch and as a CD in a limited numbered edition. Well, it wasn't numbered, but it was limited to, I think, 10,000 copies. Red Rhino, the band's label, had pressed up copies under the Reception Records imprint, and then they went bust, which means that there were 10,000 records sitting in a warehouse that the Wedding Present could release, but they needed the rights for it. So as part of their deal signing to RCA Records, their deal also included to get the 10,000 records and CDs off Reception Records administrators. They put a new sticker on the back, replacing the previous barcode. So you can clearly see there's a sticker that's been applied by an actual live human and then sold as the band's first release on RCA Records. Now the CD here is an RCA CD. The sleeves had already been printed for Reception Records. So the sleeves needed to be changed, but the CDs were new RCA pressings, but the vinyl, I think, was Reception Records on there. I'm not a fan of this at all. It sounds exactly like what it is, which is the Wedding Present performing cover versions of Ukrainian folk rock songs. And I don't like folk. I don't like folk rock. I don't like Ukrainian folk rock. The thing that drew me into the Wedding Present wasn't their Ukrainian folk rock stuff. It was their vocals and the songs that they were writing and the strength that sat inside the songs. So that is quite literally play once and never play again. George Best, as an album, had a number of lives. After it was initially released, there was an expanded edition that was released here on CD in 1997 by Cooking Vinyl. There was a 3x 10-inch box set that I think was released in, I think, 2007 or 1997 as well, with all the B-sides on. Come 2014, the Wedding Present released their reissues for the first 8 albums in 3 CD and DVD editions. This is the essential version of the album to get. It's got effectively the first 23 songs, which are on George Best Plus here, which was released in 1997. It's got additional extra tracks, so it's got compilation record appearances and versions of I'm Not Always So Stupid and Anyone Can Make a Mistake that probably appeared on a Sounds 7-inch. It's got the band's Radio 1 John Peel session from the 3rd of March 1987. It's got a concert at the London Town and Country, which is now known as the Forum, from the 11th of October. It's got a Swedish radio session from the 27th of March 1988. CD 3 is live in Rotterdam. The DVD features 3 promo videos: My Favourite Dress, Nobody's Twisting Your Arm, Why Are You Being So Reasonable Now? Additional videos taken from the Spunk VHS, which is recorded live in Leeds, and also an interview with Keith Cameron about the album and an acoustic version of Something of Nothing. It's really is a monster of a reissue, and I wish more bands would take that as their approach. In 2007, the band re-recorded George Best, which wasn't in their original game plan, which was released in 2017 as George Best 30. And George Best 30 came out of a bit of providence. The band recorded quite quickly and very economically with Steve Albini during 2008 for the El Rey album. And when they'd finished recording the El Rey album, they found that they had a morning or half a day left. So they recorded the George Best album, which they'd been playing George Best live in 2007 in the new lineup, the new configuration of the band, with Charlie on drums, Terry on bass, and I've forgotten the chap's name on guitar. Sorry, I'm sure it's on the inner sleeve, but being guitarist in the Wedding Present is pretty much almost as dangerous as being the drummer in Spinal Tap. And yeah, Graham Ramsey was on drums and Christopher McConville was on guitar. So Christopher McConville, I think, was the band's live sound engineer when Simon Cleve was in the group, and then he left. So Christopher took over guitar, and Graham Ramsey, who could also play guitar, took over on drums for a period of time. So this is a lot. This is George Best 30 was recorded in 2007. 2008, just after the band had finished recording the El Rey album, using the lineup that had toured George Best in 2007, and that suddenly reminds me that I have forgotten to bring out the George Best Live in Dublin 2007 CD and DVD that was released relatively recently. So George Best 30 was released in 2017. It came out on, I think, a limited edition red vinyl, which is here. Which is effectively a complete re-recording of the album using the band's then lineup. This is a superior recording, by the way, to the 1987 release. It's got live drums on it. It's got actual performances. It's got, it sounds better. It's recorded better. Steve Albini is producing it. I think the band are better at this period than they were in 1987. I prefer this version of the album to the. I definitely prefer this version of the album to the 1987 version. To me, I think the Wedding Present are a band that just get better and better over time, and this is a better version of it. It's better recorded, better performed, it's quicker. The songs are shorter as well, which is pretty weird when you've been playing songs for 10, 20 years, and your current lineup of the band have played it almost every night in 2007. You end up with a very, very fluent band that are able to just perform and record the songs very, very quickly. So George Best 30, recorded by Steve Albini, re-recorded in 2007, and then the band came back to it in 2017 and finished mixing it and readied it for release. This is a really great version of the album, by the way. And the last performance, the last thing which I should mention, apart from the Dublin 2007 CD, which is over there, which I'll post a link to, is this, which is Live 2017, The Wedding Present Part 2. It's called Part 2 because this is the last show that they played in 2017. It's the last time the band performed George Best live, and it's recorded in Leeds with the band's then lineup of David Gedge, Charlie Layton, Daniel Wadey on bass, and Marcus Kane on guitar. And I think it's the only recording, apart from the Home Internationals EP, that features that lineup of the group. It's a great live recording. It just is just like being there, apart from the fact that you've not got a constantly drunk, overweight, bald, fat bloke crying behind you, singing all the lyrics to all of the songs. But to be fair, that's the thing that I've missed the least about bands, even if I am the overweight, balding, fat bloke crying during all the songs. So there you have it. So that is the Wedding Present's George Best album. I think it's a really good record. It's not their best record. I think the Wedding Present are a band that have got better and better over time. And they still continue to get better and better. And every time I think they can't really get much better than this, they then come out with, an album like Going Going, which they released in 2016. I'm like, when bands get to that age, they're normally crap. The thing that I think is the most frustrating part of being a Wedding Present fan for me is the fact that the band have two careers. They have one career where they effectively are recreating the albums from 30 years previously, and the other one where they're actually a new live band, a new current band that write, record and release new material. And the new material that they're doing is as good as anything else that they have ever done in the past. And bearing in mind I haven't told you about how much I love Sea Monsters yet, just take that as a compliment, because I think they're just one of the best bands in the world right now. Conclusion time. If you are going to buy George Best, the 3 CD and DVD version is absolutely the only way to fly if you can find it, but it's probably not cheap to get. The George Best 30 re-recording with Steve Albini, this is fantastic. I absolutely, totally, 100 gazillion 1000% recommend it. And as before, any live sessions, Peel sessions, they're always good, which is why I keep coming back to the band. Even though the lineup changes, the players change, the sounds of the songs change, no matter what it is, there's something about it inherently that is always a good, strong value for money offer by the band. I love that band. The next time I talk about the Wedding Present, I'm going to be talking about their their third album, Bizarro. Let's pretend this isn't the third album at all, okay? Ukrainian folk songs. Never happened. We all just collectively hallucinated it, like Superman 4 and that fourth Indiana Jones movie. So the next time I talk about When Present, I'll be talking about Bizarro, which I think is an enormous leap forward for the band. But I don't know what my next thing is going to be. So whatever it is, whenever it's going to do it, my rules are relatively simple. I talk about whatever I like, whenever I feel like it. You're not a dick in the comments. Everyone's friendly to each other. All is good in the world and all is well. And it's getting quite late now. Good God, it's 9:45. So I'm going to stop now. I have to go to work tomorrow. And that is when I'm going to be having the caffeine, not now. Okay. See you soon. Bye.